Well, everyone, let's go and take a look at the MetaQuest 3 and compare it against the PlayStation VR 2 and see which particular headset is the better one for you. And I will definitely tell you between these two, they are very different than one another, but you can go ahead and there is a lot of overlap too. But I will tell you, there's a big caveat here. To overall kind of get into the PlayStation VR type of ecosystem, it is an overall more expensive, area than the MetaQuest side. And the reason for that is because the PlayStation VR headset is an attachment in a way to the PlayStation. Like you have to have a PlayStation and own a PlayStation in order to actually go ahead and actually use the PlayStation VR 2. On the MetaQuest side, it's a completely different situation. You don't need to really own any other accessories on the MetaQuest side in order to actually use that device. So I would hate for somebody to go and buy the PlayStation VR 2 and not own a PlayStation, then have to spend even more money on the PlayStation or return it or whatever. So I will tell you, with that huge caveat out of the way, if you want to pick up either one of these headsets, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, I will tell you, in my personal opinion, there isn't really a headset between these two that I would be like, oh my goodness, this is the clear winner here. If you have a PlayStation 5 or even a PlayStation 4, using and buying the PlayStation VR 2 would be kind of a cool thing. Like I feel like it's a very good thing. You can buy the PlayStation VR 2 or buy a PlayStation VR 1, depending on which specific console you have. And I feel like you're getting a very cool experience within this specific, device. It is a little bit of a different experience though than the MetaQuest. They are very similar in the fact that it is a, headset, that it's a VR headset that you use. They both feel fairly similar enough kind of when you're actually using them. The controllers are a little bit different, but they're still kind of the same. There's a lot of overlap here. But like I mentioned, they're different ecosystems, and even though the hardware still can kind of be somewhat similar, there's a reason why you have to go and have a PlayStation with the PlayStation VR 2. It's because it is an attachment to your PlayStation, and those games are slightly different. So keep that in mind. But on the outside, if we go and kind of take a look at them from, that perspective, the PlayStation VR 2 on the front has these camera angles and cameras that are kind of angled around the side of, the specific headset on the front. It looks very cool, but there's a few things to keep in mind here. One, you do have to have basically a wired connection from this headset to your PlayStation. So you can't really go completely out of the range of your PlayStation 5. So keep that in mind. And I'm very happy that these things are successful, but it is an attachment. Like you have to go ahead and have this thing completely attached to your PlayStation 5 at all times in order to actually use the VR headset. So that's another big thing. But I will tell you, the games and the graphics, from a PlayStation VR headset could be better than the MetaQuest side. So on the headset, you're basically getting that. It basically gives you unlimited battery because you're just attaching it to your PlayStation 5. The controllers are also very nice. I feel like they're very good controllers. And compared to the MetaQuest 2 controllers, I felt like the PlayStation VR 2 controllers were better. But now that the MetaQuest 3 does have better controllers now, it is a little bit of a different situation. The MetaQuest 3 now has not three cameras, but it has the cameras, basically 3 lines coming out the front of it, which is a very nice branding thing that Meta did. I think this was a really nice touch that Meta did here, and it looks really, really nice. Now, within the MetaQuest headset, I will say I don't know if it seems like a lighter. I think the PlayStation VR headset seems lighter, but the MetaQuest seems a little bit more balanced on my head. It may be different per person, but I feel like with the MetaQuest side, it definitely feels very good from that perspective, which is a really, really nice thing to have. Now, with the controllers of the MetaQuest, this was something that has been improved with this specific, generation. So now the top little curved, circular portion of the top of the controller has now been removed. So we don't have to worry about that anymore from this headset, which is a really nice thing to have. Before, you had to go and kind of get used to it. With even the PlayStation side, you still have that wand kind of going around from the top of this controller. I don't know if people are into it. I'm not a big fan of it. With the MetaQuest side, you don't have to worry about it, which is nice. But the joysticks are also a little bit different now, and they kind of match a little bit of what the PlayStation VR 2 actually has. So I think that's kind of a nice little thing going on for that specific headset too. But this is probably the biggest advantage going on for the MetaQuest 3. Is that it is a wireless headset. So you can actually go ahead, put this specific headset on and take it anywhere with you. That by far is probably one of the biggest advantages going on for the MetaQuest 3. And I think that in and of itself is a very, very cool thing. They having the ability of basically going through wherever you want to and throwing this headset on is very cool. And I think that would probably be the biggest reason why most people wind up buying a MetaQuest 3 over the PlayStation VR 2. But even more so than that, the other big advantage here is that you have to have a PlayStation 5 in order to use the PlayStation VR 2. Like I mentioned, there's probably not a lot of people who want to deal with that. And even if there are people who want to go ahead and already have a PlayStation 5, spending even more money to buy another PlayStation VR headset that isn't even wireless is a little bit of a hard sell, I would say. So I think that in and of itself is another big advantage for the Meta Quest 3. And I think that would be a big reason why people would go ahead and move from something like a PlayStation VR 2 headset and consider something like a PlayStation, or like a Meta Quest 3 from this example. So I think that is another thing to kind of keep in mind there too. Now, on top of that, with something like the Meta Quest 3, there's also a little bit of a difference from the, resolutions of these displays. So to kind of give you some perspective, with the Meta Quest 3, you're getting a 2064 by 2208 pixels per inch per eye kind of situation. The PlayStation VR 2 is somewhat similar. It's 2000 by 2040. So it's a little bit of a smaller resolution on the PlayStation VR 2, but you're not going to be able to notice it at all. But there's a slight difference with the display. Now, we all know, in my opinion, that AMOLED displays are better than LCD displays. The Meta Quest 3 has an LCD display. The PSVR 2 has an AMOLED display. This is a pretty big difference. AMOLED displays, in my opinion, are so much better, and that's something I love seeing on the, PlayStation VR 2. It's only a matter of time before the Quest 3 actually has an AMOLED display inside of it too, but that is something I'm really hoping for, at least with the next couple generations, that actually ends up happening on the, PlayStation, on the Meta Quest side rather than the PlayStation side. So you are actually getting a 120Hz panel on the Meta Quest 3. The PSVR 2 goes from 90 to 120Hz, which could be a nice thing if you want to save some battery on the PSVR 2, but it's a wired connection, so it's not even saving battery, so that isn't even really relevant here. So I would tell you from the specification side, the PSVR 2 kind of wins a little bit on paper just because of the AMOLED display, but the Quest 3 is giving you a little bit of a better situation when it comes down to that, little, bump in resolution, which is a nice thing. Now, from the gaming selection side, I will tell you they're probably the quality, I would say the graphics of the games are probably better on the PlayStation VR 2, just because you're tapped into like a plugged in hardware of the PlayStation 5. I feel like there's a lot of different situations going on where that PlayStation VR 2 can tap into the performance of a PlayStation and kind of jump up in terms of that, which I think is really cool. I also think the controllers are built up a little bit better just because you have like haptic feedback and adaptive triggers, which is really cool. So I think that's a pretty cool thing going on for that specific headset. But the Meta Quest side, I think, is because it's like its own ecosystem, I think that's a really cool thing going on for that specific headset. And I think if I were to go ahead and buy one of these headsets, the Meta Quest may make a little bit more sense because those games are available. And they're just, I don't have to tap into a PlayStation to do it. I can just use it within its own ecosystem. I also feel like there's more of a community behind the Meta Quest side. So if I were to go ahead and actually use something from the Meta Quest side, I feel like the Meta Quest 3 would kind of win there because I'm basically, there's just so much of a bigger community. There's a lot more like modifications you can do, I feel like, on a Quest 3. If it's based off the Quest 2, there should be a bigger community coming on for the Meta Quest 3 over time. And I think that's another pretty big advantage for the Meta Quest 3 as well. So to kind of sum it up, what I'll definitely tell you is I don't really think there's a device here that's like, oh my goodness, you have to buy this one over this one. But I feel like the Meta Quest 3 is probably the one I could recommend to every single person. And they would, if you want to get into the VR side, this would be the one that would make the most amount of sense to me. The PlayStation VR 2, you would have to buy a PlayStation 5 and a PlayStation VR 2 and spend like over $1,000 probably. The Meta Quest 3, you can just buy this device, spend $500, and basically get a very good device from this thing in its own ecosystem. And you don't have to worry about like having a different device with you at all times. So that's kind of how both these headsets kind of compare, at least in my opinion. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.